So what I thought I'd start with is just looking at a typical scenario. So a typical scenario for a developer. So if you imagine that you're this developer and you've got a number of changes to the schemas in your development database, and as part of the release you need to deploy these changes to the test environment. So how do you go about doing that? There are a number of different approaches. So one thing you could do is to write the scripts by hand, and this is something that is still fairly commonplace. I mean, there's loads of tooling out there, but with development tasks, it does seem to be fairly common for developers or DBAs to write the SQL scripts by hand to update the changes from one instance of their database to another. So the good thing about this, I mean, it does give the developer complete control over the script. And they're confident that if somebody else runs that script, it's going to work because it's something that they've written and they're good at writing their scripts. Of course, the main downside to this is it's very time consuming to write an update script by hand. So obviously extra time will need to be factored in to the development cycle to write these scripts. But writing a script to update the changes, as we'll see in a moment, I mean, it is just really one side of the process. And if developers are writing scripts by hand, they also will have to write another script to validate that the changes that they've pushed across have actually been successful. So there's an added bit of time there as well. I do think there is some risks with this. The main risk being that the fun of development really is in actually doing the development, and it's not really in pushing these changes from the development environment across the test environment. So something as crucial as writing this script could be seen as a task that's sort of done at the end of the day, and there is the potential that it could be rushed, and of course some errors could be put into that. Hence why the step of actually validating that the changes have migrated across successfully is hugely important. Some organisations won't let developers push changes across from the development environment into the test environment. So developers will have to hand over responsibility to the DBA. Of course, from a developer's perspective, that's good in the sense that they can get on with the stuff that they enjoy, and that's in the development tasks. But a downside to that is that they lose a little bit of visibility over the update process. They hand the script over to the DBA. The DBA's got a huge amount of other stuff that they need to concentrate on, and there's a huge amount of work that DBAs have to do. So the developers themselves may be very keen to push those changes straight across. They've just done this work. Everybody, once they've done their work, they like to see what's changed and to see it actually being implemented, but it might take a little bit more time. And the final one that I've got on here is you could also build the database from scratch. It seems like a relatively valid approach. So just totally wipe the test database and then back it up from the development database, or sorry, back up the development database and then restore, and copy the schema and data files across to the test server. So the good thing with this is that you know that you have an exact copy of the development database because you've just restored it from a backup of the development database. But if the databases are large, I mean, this is a huge amount of overkill. It's going to take quite a long time to back up the database in the first place and then to restore it. And it's even more overkill if you've only got a couple of changes that you've actually done that you want to put across. Not to mention the fact that there's going to be a load of test data associated on the on the test database, which won't be in the development environment, so you're going to have to put that in as well. So the final thing we've got here is to actually use tools to assist you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring up Schema Compare for Oracle. So this is a product that fits within the deployment suite for Oracle, and show you how easy it is to use Schema Compare to push some changes across from one environment to another environment. So let me just fire up my environment. Okay, so the screen we're looking at the moment is the start screen for Schema Compare for Oracle. So this is, we're basically kicking off a new project here. And what we're going to do is if you look at the top here, we're going to compare one database to another database. And the example that we were looking at was we're going to compare our development environment to our test environment. So I'll just copy these credentials across. Okay, great thing about live demos is it doesn't always go to plans, but let's bring up, okay, so here we go. So we've got my development environment, which is called widget dev, and I'm going to scroll down and find my test environment on the widget test environment as well. Okay, and I'm just going to compare these two databases. The version of Schema Compare that we're looking at the moment is Schema Compare 3, and we've done a huge amount of work on the performance of the product. The feedback that we got was that Schema Compare 2 was very fast anyway, and now it's even faster. So you can see how quickly it was able, this is a live demonstration, remember, so you can see how quickly it's compared two environments. They're not the biggest environments, but it does go through that whole comparison extremely quickly. Okay, so what we're looking at here, we've got 10 objects, and we've got 5 objects that exist in both development and test, but they're different. And then we've also got 5 objects here that only exist in the development environment. I'm just going to bring this screen up a little bit here. So we've got a number of different things. So let's have a look at one of these tables here. So we've got a references table. So this is something, as I say, that's in both development and test. And looking at the screen at the bottom here, the differences have been highlighted. So it's super quick for you to see how or which object's different, and then why they're different. And we can just keep scrolling through these. Again, everything is highlighted. If we want to, we can filter by particular types of objects. I've got every object showing as well. There's also been a little bit of development that's been done, as I mentioned, and these are the new objects. Obviously, they're only showing on one side of the side-by-side view at the bottom, because they are new objects. So to push these objects across from development into test, just simply need to highlight all of the objects here. I can choose individual objects if I want to, but I'm going to push all these changes across and then to kick off the deployment wizard. Okay, so we've got 2 options here. We can deploy using Schema Compare for Oracle, or we can just create a deployment script if you want to run the script through your own IDE. Even if you use the deploy using Schema Compare for Oracle, you'll be able to get access to that script. It's hugely important that there is the ability to export the script. Maybe you just want to review it, or maybe you want to keep a record of it. But either way, you're going to be able to do that. Okay, so we've got a couple of deployment issues here. So the tool is clever enough to be able to warn you about things. And we can actually make some changes here if you wanted to. Also, the tool is clever enough to actually suggest an action for it as well. But the point is you have full control over that. And here is our deployment script. So the comparison was extremely fast, but also you can see that the creation of the script itself was very fast as well. We've got quite a few lines here of fairly intricate SQL. We can look at a summary of what's actually going to happen and any warnings as well. Now, if we clicked on deploy now, it would go ahead and then deploy all of those changes. We can also copy the script to the clipboard, or we can save the script. Okay, so let's deploy those changes. Okay, so it's recompared the environments for us, and we can say, as we can see, we now have 10 identical objects within our development and our test environment. I was showing you how to use the tool to fully automate the process. As I mentioned, you can just then take that script out, you can send that off to your DBA to review it, and you can run that script through your IDE. So even just the actual idea of creating a deployment script, the tool is going to save you a huge amount of time. Okay, so what we were looking at there was really one developer wanting to push their changes across into the test environment. Most circumstances, though, there's obviously a number of different tools. Sorry, I've just got a question up here about the name of the product. The product's called Schema Compare for Oracle, and it's part of the deployment suite for Oracle. So as I mentioned, so we've just shown pushing changes across, but really it was one developer pushing those changes across from their development environment into the test environment. But in most organizations, there are multiple developers all working on an instance of the database. So this adds further complexity in the deployment process itself. Now, the developers themselves, they could all be working on the live database, and what I mean by live database in this scenario is the development environment itself is in what's known as a central location, or it's a shared database. So everybody has access to the development database, and they'll be developing live on that. Developers might actually have their own dedicated database which they work on, but whether they're all working on a central database or development database, the point is they're all going to be simultaneously working on things, and they're going to be pushing changes across, or wanting to push changes into that. So does the team keep track of what each other are working on? One of the ways that they can do that is by implementing a source control system. And with a source control system, obviously, it's great for teams to be able to manage changes that they're doing themselves. But I think it's even more important if the work that they're doing goes side by side with the development of the application itself. How else do you really tie up the database development and the application development into the same release? So I just mentioned application development, and this is something that I find quite interesting, in that source control, and particularly a dedicated setup, as one showing here, is very commonplace within application development. It has been for a long time, but it's not so common within database development. But the benefits of database source control are virtually identical to the benefits that application developers, and why application developers use source control and make sure that they source control their application code. So I think that the main benefit of source control in database code is it provides the ability to keep the development team in sync. A successful database development depends on successful coordination of the development team. And source control removes many obstacles from team collaboration. So without source control, you generally have to implement a number of workarounds to be able to ensure that developers have the latest database changes and that they're working on the latest one, and they're not overriding each other's changes. So that could be that they meet face-to-face, or they could use instant messenger, or email, or maybe they actually stop development entirely until they get their updates or wait for their team members to complete a particular part of work, a particular stage in their work. Great thing about having database source control or having your database code within source control is it's very easy for people to resume partially completed work. They don't have to learn what other people are doing. They can just grab an update and they can then start working on that straight away. It also helps prevent disasters. I mean, disaster is a relative term, but for a development team, I mean, days or even hours of lost time can be disastrous. And one of the ways it helps prevent disasters is by providing improved visibility over who's changed what and which is the latest version of the database code. As I mentioned before, it enables people to resume partially completed work in the same sense it enables people. It's very easy for developers and teams to revert to previous versions of the database code. And the final thing is it helps companies conform to best practice. As I mentioned before, within application development, it is almost unheard of to be working on your code and not put that into source control. To not have a version, a centralized version, that if something goes wrong, you can just grab the update, you can revert to a previous version. You can make sure you're not overwriting your colleagues' changes, and you're always sure that you're working on the latest version of the database. Again, these types of scenarios are much more common in a dedicated setup. But even when people are working on one shared and one centralized environment, they will always be working on the latest version of the database. However, if they want to go back a step, or they want to see who's made changes, using source control makes that whole thing much easier. So in terms of like a minimum set of best practice points, some here enable you to manage how schema and data changes are made, to document schema changes, to maintain a detailed history of who made which changes and when. And you can also use it to document database schema and access permissions. And if problems do occur, it's very easy to revert to previous versions. So I'm going to go back to Schema Compare now, because we've added some new functionality into the product, which will help you source control your database schemas right now. Okay, so I've got the screen that I left up here. So we've now put our development changes into our test database, but we didn't put these in source control. We just pushed them straight across. So there's no record now of these changes, apart from the fact that they are now, the test environment is now the same as the development environment. We can't really see which changes were made. We've got no comments. We haven't added any comments here. We could, using this product, we could, if we wanted to, reverse the comparison and push the change back if we'd kept a backup copy of the development environment or test environment. So I'm going to edit the project, and what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to tell Schema Compare for Oracle to create a folder of scripts. I'm going to export all of the objects that I have in my development environment as scripts. So the creation scripts of these objects. And then that will enable me to put that folder under source control. So I'll effectively be creating a copy of my database as a set of folders and a set of scripts within these folders. Again, this is something that some of you may be doing already. You may be scripting out your objects manually, or you may be using some tooling to export them out individually, and then having to put them together. Schema Compare for Oracle is going to take away all of that hassle. It's just going to do the whole thing for you. So first thing I need to do is actually compare to a scripts folder rather than a database. Again, I'm going to be looking at my development environment. So the first thing I need to do is create a script folder. So I haven't set anything up here because I wanted to show the whole process to you. So let's go into my folder here. I'm going to create a new folder. So this this D work and database is obviously linked to a Subversion repository, or obviously linked to a source control repository. I'm using Subversion. You could be using any one of a number of different source control systems. The database that I'm working on at the moment is called Obstacle. So I'm going to create a folder called Obstacle. I'm going to select that folder. Okay, and we can see what note here. This folder is empty, so I can populate it by running a comparison and then deploying it. So exactly what we've done before. So quick comparison, obviously we've now got the side-by-side diff view again. We've got the 10 objects that are in our development environment, and there's nothing within this folder that we've just created. So in exactly the same way, we're just going to highlight all of the objects, and we're going to kick off the deployment wizard. We can create a deployment script again if we wanted to, but I actually want to write the scripts to a folder, and I'm going to recompare after deployment as well. Okay, so we've got a review here of the files, a summary again, so all the things that we saw in the first part of the demonstration, and now I'm going to create that folder of scripts. Okay, so here we are. So we're within the Obstacle folder again, and we've got a folder that the product has created called widget dev, and within widget dev we have all of the creation scripts for our indexes, for our packages, procedures, tables, etc. If I go back to here, I'm going to add these folders and files to source control. Okay, for some reason I seem to have lost my okay. Just bear with me. I just want to pull. So I've got remoting into a dual monitor. So I just wanted to try and pull this across. Okay, here we go. Fantastic. So we can see that all of those have been now added into source control. Okay, go back to Schema Compare. It's done a comparison. And at the top here we've got our database, widget dev, and we've got our script folder called widget dev as well. And as you can see, there are 10 identical objects in both database and within the folder that we've just created. So main benefit of doing that is that any changes I now make to my development database that I've got access to, I can immediately put under source control. So let's bring up SQL Developer. I've already got it open on one of the tables, so this is widget references table, and I'm going to make a change to one of the columns here, or to a column within the widget references table. And I'm just going to change the size of this column from 25 to 50. Okay, let's go back to Schema Compare, and let's refresh that. So it's going to do a comparison again for us between my database and the script folder, and we can see we no longer have 10 identical objects, we've got 9 identical objects, and we've also got the table that I've just changed, and we can see the changes highlighted there. So the size of the column in my development is 50, and in the folder, remember this is not the test database, this is the folder that we created, the local copy of script folders. It's shown that there's a difference between those. Okay, so at the moment we need to push those changes across. So in the same way, I'm just going to push this change across here. So update the scripts folder. Okay, sorry, so what I didn't do originally was actually commit those changes. So I just added them, but I didn't commit them. So apologies for that, so let me just do that quickly, otherwise it won't work. Okay, so sorry. Okay, so now that's under source control. Let's actually go back into SQL Developer and let's change that column size back to 25. Again, the great thing about live demos is you only really get one chance to do something. But okay, here we go. So back to where we were before. I do apologise for the delay there. So we've got one object that is different. Let's deploy that. Let's update that script folder. Fortunately, it's nice and quick. Okay. And there we go. So we can now see if we go into widget dev, into those tables, that particular file there has got the little red dot there to show that we've updated that file and it hasn't yet been committed to source control. So as you normally would do, we can now commit that change into source control. Just make sure we've got something that is useful. It's going to enable other people to understand what we've actually done. And let's commit that there. Okay, it's updated to say that this copy is in sync with what's in source control. So the big benefit, as you can imagine here, is you've got a team of developers all using this. You can get the latest changes as you normally would do using your source control system. You can do your development, you can commit those changes, and you can keep a record and make sure that everybody is in sync with what's going on the development. So what I've just shown you there is a feature within Schema Compare for Oracle, and it's a new feature that we've added to version 3. But for this to really work, we needed to create a dedicated source control product, and we're creating a new tool called Source Control for Oracle. And this is going to connect your database to your source control system within a graphical interface, and it's going to enable you to automatically store a complete history of your schema changes and share them with your team. This is a product that we're developing at the moment. So I don't have a demonstration. What I do have, fortunately, is a wireframe of one of the screens for the product. So there's a couple of things here that you might have thought from the demonstration of Schema Compare that you still obviously had to go. Schema Compare made it extremely easy to export the structure of your schema as a set of creator scripts, export all of the objects. But you still then had to go to the folder itself and to commit the changes through there. And you had to go back to Schema Compare to see any differences and to see where things have changed. This interface is going to do all of that for you. So looking at the kind of the top left-hand side, once you've connected to your source control system, this view here again is more for a dedicated environment, but it could also work for a shared environment where each developer has access to their own dedicated schema and they're pushing those changes into another schema, which is like the live schema, so to speak, or the main development schema. So the first thing that people would need to do is to get the latest change. You don't want to be doing work if somebody's already done that, but you don't want to be overwriting everybody's work as well. So getting the latest changes, and this tool is going to notify you of the number of changes that are available for you to get to make your environment in sync with what's in source control. Of course, you've probably been doing a little bit of work already, and until you push those changes, until you deploy those changes, you haven't overwritten anything. But there are going to be a number of changes that you already have, that you're desperate to get into the test environment. But as we've explained before, you need to make sure you put those under source control first. And so we've got a number of changes here. So in this example, there's 4 changes. We've also got a history of changes that have been made, that we've made, and that also our development team have made as well. So we can very quickly go through and look at those changes. So once you've got the latest update, you know you've got 4 changes to make. You can decide to commit all of those changes together. Again, simple checkboxes enable you to do that. We're also going to see what those changes are. So the type of change, which object, the type of object, and the owner. The side-by-side diff view is a great feature of Schema Compare for Oracle, so we've brought that into this product as well. So not only will you be able to see the type of objects and the type of change in the table above, but in the side-by-side diff view, you'll be able to actually look through the DDL and see exactly what those changes are. And then finally, you can put your message that will go through into your source control systems, keep a record, make it much easier for you to understand and for your other team members to understand what those changes are, and you can then commit those changes in. So as I mentioned, this is a new product that we're developing at the moment. You can find out more about the tool at redgate.com/source control for Oracle. Please do join the beta program. We need your help. We need to understand exactly how this tool is going to help you out, and requirements for the way you work and for your setup. In return for giving us some feedback, you'll get access to early versions before anybody else. So please go to redgate.com/source control for Oracle and join the beta program. Okay, so in summary, deploying schema changes is not a simple procedure. There are a number of ways that you can do that. You can employ manual ways, but with products like Schema Compare for Oracle, they're going to make it so much easier for you to generate scripts and to get an idea of the differences between environments. a team of developers and multiple developers all deploying changes, all working on the environment at the same time can add more complexity. And you need to be looking at source control in your schemas to give you better visibility of those changes and to prevent errors and to ensure that everybody is in sync with what's going on and to match database code to application code for particular releases. The deployment suite of Oracle, the deployment suite for Oracle as a product set is focused on helping you deploy Oracle database changes from schema and data to managing the link between your database and source control. One thing that Redgate does as a company is we believe in developing tools that solve a specific problem and making those tools the best of what they do. So please do check out the Oracle tools that make up the deployment suite at redgate.com/Oracle. If you're interested in Schema Compare for Oracle, so that's the product that I have shown you today, you can find out more information at redgate.com/Schema Compare. Sorry. You'll also be able to download a free 14-day trial. It's a fully functioning trial. We haven't taken anything out. All of the features are there. So please download a trial and you can actually try what I've done today. This video will be recorded, so as soon as I put the video up, you can follow what I've done and try that out in your own environment. See if that's something that can help you out. I've put some details of price in there. It's a question that usually comes up when I do these sessions, so some prices there, the starting off price, but you can find out all the information at redgate.com/Schema Compare, as well as looking at a number of reviews by users, and there are links off to reviews and other testimonials there as well. Okay, so I hope that's given you kind of a good idea of some of the challenges that teams of developers face in trying to push schema changes across from one environment to the other, and how the Redgate tools can help you do that. Please, there's a couple of questions that I've seen pop up. If you have any questions that you'd like me to answer, please do that. I'd also be very happy to go back and show you things that are on the product again. Okay, so a question from Yavor Nikolov. Thank you, Yavor. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. This is a very good question. Is Schema Compare fully functional on non-Windows platform? It is a Windows application, so it works on a Windows environment, but we do have a number of customers that work primarily within, say, a Mac environment, but they have a virtualized Windows environment, and they'll fire up that environment to use our tools. I guess the time it takes to install a virtualized environment and then fire up when you need to do a comparison is still going to be much quicker than trying to write the update scripts and doing all these comparison tasks by hand. Okay, so we've got a question here from Greg Buchanan. Is asking the expected delivery date for Schema Compare 3. Schema Compare 3 is available now. So the product that I was showing is the latest version of Schema Compare for Oracle. So if you go to redgate.com/schema-compare, you can download Schema Compare for Oracle 3 now. You may be interested in when source control for Oracle will be available. If you join the beta program, you'll get access to a development timeline. We're hoping to launch the product in early Q1 of next year. At the moment, that's January. Please do join the beta program, and you'll get regular updates of when exactly that will be. So you can see that we're pushing quite hard to get this product ready for you as soon as we can. Okay, a question here from TJ Kernan, and it's about what database permissions are needed to compare schemas. He's a bit concerned about granting too much access to some developers. Obviously, for the developers to be able to compare schemas, they are going to need access, as they are going to need user permissions to access those schemas. This is not an area of my expertise. Maybe somebody could sort of help me out in terms of actually what type of permissions you could get away with, but obviously the developers themselves, they're going to need to be able to, if they're comparing, I guess that they're going to need to be able to read access. If they're deploying, they're going to need some kind of write access. A question from David Hart. Thank you, David. Will data compare be supported? Many databases have system data that needs to be kept in sync. So I'm guessing this question is actually about source control for Oracle product. We do have a tool that fits within the deployment suite for Oracle called Data Compare, which enables you to compare table data or configuration data between your environments. For source control for Oracle, at the moment, the first release will focus on the schema itself, schema objects. I can't give any kind of timelines, but of course, it's very important that data is also tracked, and so it's likely that that will be something that we would develop. I don't want to give any timelines, but that's certainly something that we will look into developing. But at the moment, Schema Compare for Oracle is concerned about the schema structure. Okay, a question from Vijay. Thank you, Vijay. This is about in terms of where to install the product. So Schema Compare for Oracle and all the tools within the deployment suite for Oracle, they can be installed on the client machine. So they're client applications. You don't need to install anything on the database. Obviously, the client machine just needs access to the database. Another question here from Yeva in terms of the types of changes. Schema Compare will pick up any changes within the DDL of the objects that you're comparing against. So I mean, I showed a very simple change of just changing the width of a column, but as you could see from where it was comparing an empty schema, where it's comparing the script folder, it was looking, there was lots of stuff on the development environment, lots of fairly intricate stuff there, and there's nothing. So it is able to pick up any number of changes that you actually make to the objects in your schemas, and it will highlight those accordingly. Okay, so a question from Adam Yardi. Thank you, Adam. So he says, we use TFS. Any issues with using the Schema Compare tool, especially considering checkouts with server workplaces? So what the Schema Compare tool does at the moment is just to export the structure of the schema as a set of creation scripts or folders of creation scripts. And it's that folder that you then put under source control. So it should work with any source control system. The source control for Oracle product, sorry, it's a little bit confusing. I keep talking about two different products. The product we saw today was Schema Compare for Oracle, and the product that's coming soon, which will make this whole process much easier, is called Source Control for Oracle. That will support Subversion and Team Foundation. best place to find out about all of our products, as I mentioned before, is at redgate.com/Oracle. Okay, so we've got a question here from Richard Evans. Does using this on an Oracle environment require the customer to license the change management pack with Oracle? Absolutely not. So this is a standalone product provided by Redgate Software. Standalone interface. The great thing is that you can use this product without having to purchase licenses of the change management pack. So a follow-up from Richard, can be run on XE Standard and Enterprise. Absolutely. So the product just needs to have a connection to your Oracle database. It can then compare the schemas within the same database or different or same schemas on different databases or different schemas on different databases. So this product is completely separate from Oracle and from SQL Developer. Another question from Adam Yardley. Thank you, Adam. Is there any integration of the source control tool with Visual Studio? So this is quite an interesting question here, because we found that the Oracle community tend to use quite a lot of different IDEs, which is why we've created a standalone product. The great thing, if you've got teams of developers and each developer is using a different IDE, you don't have to get everybody to work on the same IDE to use this particular function. It's going to hook into to any of those in the sense that they can output the scripts and run those scripts through their IDE. So it's a standalone tool. That's an interesting question here from Per Stahlhansky. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And if you're working on the same database instance, how do you prevent simultaneous updates? And I think this is, I guess, one of the issues or the teams need to be aware of if they are all working on the same database instance. What source control for Oracle will enable you to do. So again, not the Schema Compare product I'll show you, but the source control for Oracle tool that we're developing at the moment. What that will enable you to do is that when you do make changes, you can check them straight into source control, and it's going to require the development team looking at the product and looking at the history of what people are making, what changes people are making, and being aware of that. But if everybody's working on the same instance, they're all working live, then it's going to be very difficult to. The team itself are going to have some kind of process and some kind of way of communicating the work that they're doing. And in some ways, it's why it's more of a dedicated setup, whether that's an installation, a local installation, a local copy of the database, or granting the developers in the team access to their own dedicated schema within the central database. Why that makes it much easier to manage changes and make sure that developers aren't overriding each other's work. But at least with the source control for Oracle product, it'll make it much easier for people to log the work that they're doing, particularly matching it up to different releases and versions of an application. And if anything was to go wrong, then this product's going to make it much easier for people to be able revert back to an older version if something did happen. Okay, so there are no more questions that have come in. So I just want to finish off by saying thank you everybody for attending the session. Thank you for staying on for the Q&A and for putting your questions to me. This webinar was brought to you by the Deployment Suite for Oracle and for Redgate Software. Thank you again for attending, and I wish you all a very nice evening or a nice day depending on where you are. Thank you again.